The night before New Year's Eve, a time when the city, covered in snow, falls into complete silence. People are busy preparing for the celebration. Streets are decorated with festive lights, stores are crowded, and the air is filled with excitement. I was sitting at home trying to decide how to spend my evening when I received a call from Alex. We'd been friends for a long time, and he knew I was someone he could rely on for anything, from watching old films to looking after his dog, Bailey. "Hey, could you watch Bailey for a couple of days? I'm going out of town, and she needs some company. You know how she gets when she's alone." I agreed without hesitation. Bailey and I had always gotten along well. She was a golden retriever with bright, intelligent eyes and, at first glance, a pure and innocent nature. Not that I believed in the paranormal, but there were times when I felt like the dog understood more than just basic commands. It was a cold day, and the snow kept falling, swirling in the wind as if it had no end. I drove to Alex's house on the edge of town near the woods. The neighborhood was deserted, like many of the houses in that area. Old, crooked buildings with dimly lit windows. The winter made it seem even more isolated. Bailey greeted me at the door, wagging her tail, and immediately led me into the kitchen, where I found a note from Alex. "Look after her. She doesn't like being left alone and gets anxious at night. Put her in your bed. She likes it. Don't let her outside after dark. And if she starts acting weird, don't panic. Just call me. I trust you." I laughed, thinking it was a bit much. The dog was a little clingy, but aside from that, she was perfectly normal. The first night, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Bailey curled up next to me in bed as I watched TV. Later, when it was time to sleep, I closed the windows, turned off the lights, and put out the fire in the fireplace. Everything felt normal, except the room where I was sleeping seemed darker than usual, and the silence felt unsettling. The next morning, I woke up to find Bailey standing by the window, gazing out into the dark woods. It was 6 a.m., and despite the early hour, she looked as if she hadn't slept at all. "Bailey, what are you doing?" I asked as I hurried over to her, but she didn't seem to notice me, continuing to stare into the darkness. Then I noticed her tail slowly lowering, which was unusual. Normally, she was full of energy. I patted her head, and she turned to face me as if waking from a bad dream. The following day, I noticed that Bailey didn't want to go for a walk, though she usually dragged me outside. Now and then, she would go to the door and whine, but as soon as I opened it, she would turn away. "What's going on with you?" I asked, sensing something wasn't right, but I still didn't think too much of it. This went on for 2 days, and by the third day, I was faced with something I couldn't explain. That evening, as I lay in bed, Bailey was once again by the window, staring out into the dark. The silence in the room felt thick and oppressive. Then suddenly, she moved away from the window and began walking toward me, but this time, her movements were strange. She moved slowly, her eyes distant and heavy. "Bailey, what's happening?" I asked as I stood up and walked over to her. She suddenly raised her head, and I saw something in her eyes that truly frightened me. Was that something human? A look that was haunting, suffocating. I tried to comfort her, but just then I heard a sound from outside, as if someone was walking through the snow. It was so clear that my blood ran cold. I rushed to the corridor to see who could be out there, but the darkness revealed nothing except the wind moving the branches. Bailey sat next to me, staring at something in terror. Her eyes were full of fear, as if she saw something I couldn't, but she couldn't speak. That night I heard footsteps, not outside, inside the house. They were coming from somewhere distant, but no one was there. I froze when I realized the footsteps were coming from the dog. Bailey's body began to move as though someone else was controlling her. And that's when I understood. What was sitting beside me was no longer just a dog. It was something else, something that didn't belong here. I tried to call Alex, but the line was dead. To this day, I don't know what happened that night. But since then, Bailey has never been the same. And every New Year's Eve, I remember how she stood by the window, waiting for someone who would never come.